And finally I start on the scriber. It'll be made out of this precision ground flat stock type 01. I don't know what that all means because this is something I had in stock. In fact, the piece was a 1/4 inch thick by 2 inches wide and I believe 18 inches long. And different companies sell this, including Starrett. And the piece that I need is roughly, for this, because I believe this is in metric, 1 inch by 1 13/16. So I've already laid that out. Roughly I'll saw that out. And notice that this is blue on the end, so that would have been the color. And now that'll be cut off. But somebody's already been chewing on this from some years back. And it wasn't me, because I just kind of recently rediscovered this in my stash. But it's interesting to note that on the label it gives you the analysis of all the materials, the elements that are in there, different metals and non-distorting, complete directions for heat treating, which I will follow to the T. I will harden it according to what you see here, and then it has to be in oil. And then for tempering, it calls for different temperatures there depending on what Rockwell hardness, and I want it to be, well, it doesn't really matter much to me, but it'll be someplace in there between 400 and 500, and I will just do that in my GE kitchen range when my wife's at Walmart, and she'll never know. So that'll be simple enough, and it says for 1 hour. Alright. What I'll do here first is just to rough saw this out to the size, and I think I'll mill it to the line so I have a perfectly rectangular piece with square corners to begin the layout for this. Real quickly, if I may, a few more comments on precision ground flat stock. And Starrett is one of the leading suppliers, and if you look in their older catalog, and there are many companies that make this, but they have a whole section here in the catalog on precision ground flat stock, and there it shows some of the uses in tool making and die making and so on. It's an expensive product, and what I showed you there is $25 or $30 from McMaster-Carr. And it's available in oil hardening or water hardening or air hardening. And you can see from the stock list there are just pages and pages of that flat stock, and it comes in either 18-inch or 36-inch lengths commonly. So it's also accurately ground such that it's great for parallels. The only trouble is it would cost more than you buying some ground parallels ready to use. In some cases, if the work is irregular, you might be well advised to do the machining before you cut it off. But since I already have cut it off and laid it out, the next thing that I always do on something irregular like this is to blot out the part that is to be removed, that is the waste stock, so you don't cut into the wrong piece. As I once said before, not that I've ever done it. So there you can see the complete layout. So what I will do is go over to the bandsaw and saw this out off camera, and then quickly put it in the milling machine and mill that off. That way this will be parallel, and I got something to hang on to when I machine this part later on. Now remember, after heat treating, this often gets scaly, and I'm not sure just how scaly, so I'd like to leave just a little bit of material to clean up, although it would be too hard to machine. It would have to be ground or sanded, but I don't want to lose the precision of it. So next time you see it, this corner with my thumb will be gone. It's starting to shape up, so now I'm going to work the other side. And I just measured the radius here with a radius gauge, and it is, actually this would be metric, but in imperial size, it's very close to 1/8 inch radius, which is a 1/4 inch end mill. So I will saw that out, but not I won't square the corner out because I want to go back in there and use my end mill in this manner rather than the end of it. That'll give me that radius. Not that it's necessary to copy this verbatim, but that's kind of what I'm doing. And just one last piece to cut off here, that 30-degree angle, but rather than saw it, there's so little there, I'll just mill it all off on the Bridgeport. There it is, ready for heat treating, but before I do, and I'll do that tomorrow, let me just take a few key measurements off of this. Remember, it's 1/4 inch thick. I told you the overall blank size a little while ago, but here, and these might be odd dimensions because of the fact that I told you the original was metric, and I was transferring a lot of the dimension, or a lot of the lines. So right there we got that dimension if anyone is interested. .250. What did I miss? Did I get this one? I know I missed something there, but oh well. I think from what I gave you, you can come up with the any dimensions that you need. Again, it's highly unlikely anybody's going to make one of these. Ready to be hardened. I haven't talked much about the final finishing on this, but with your surface plate clean, or you can do this on your bandsaw table, or any true surface, but I'd like to try to true up the bottom just a little bit. And remember, on the commercially made ones, they purposely cast them this way so there isn't too much to lap or grind. So I think, yeah, even that old Brown and Sharp is made that way. Ours is solid. If one had an ocean, he could mill a pocket in here, but I doubt that's necessary. And we got 2 grades of paper here, and maybe you need more than that. This white stuff is a 220, and this is a 320. So taking the coarser, I'm just going to move this in a figure 8, but maybe to start with, just in a circle to see if there's high spots. And it doesn't show up. I should put some bluing or something on there and see where there are high spots. But I think that'll clog this up. But maybe I'll take a couple seconds to do that, let it dry, and then come back to this. See you in 10 minutes. Alright, I've got a red dye number 3 on there, and it's dry, so let's real quickly see how true this is. Just rolled steel, Well, it sure came off even. So I don't think there's much leveling to do at all. It's just a matter of how good a finish I would want, and that'll get nicked up pretty bad. And since this is unhardened steel, and remember you cannot harden this because it's mild steel, it will get a lot of nicks in it, so we don't worry about it. It can always be dressed up a little bit like this at a later time. So that was a waste of time, other than to show you that roll stock that I got from Bernie is pretty nice material. I said figure 8. That's the way you're supposed to lap. Alright, that's all I'm doing with that, and I could dress this up just for appearance, but notice how I broke all the corners all the way around on the top side just to finish it. It makes it look finished, and you could make a lot more of a radius like that, and if you have radius cutters you could use them, but don't do it on the bottom, just do it on the top. And you can see the milling marks here. I did nothing there. Okay, and did I show you this yet? For the stubby post, I did cut off that one skinny ruler that I talked so much about that had the phone number on, and it's a good rule, you know, to use quality tools. But I used some dabs of 5-minute epoxy, and that seemed to hold it in place, and this is my alternate stubby post, because most all of my layout work really is you know, 1 or 2 inches, and often just below a ½ inch. So I don't do a lot of it way up high, because first of all, I don't do a lot of large work, and secondly, a height gauge gets so wobbly when you've got the scriber way up at the top like this. Just so much chance for it wiggling around. Perhaps I'll show just a little bit of the heat treating. And I've set this up now with my little hearth. These are fire brick. And remember, it's oil hardening steel, and you saw the directions already to heat it to between 1450 and 1500, and that's strictly a judgment call on my part in regards to the color, which would be a cherry red, which is the critical temperature. And I'm using my Press-to-Light torch. It's acetylene. For a small piece like this, it'll be quite sufficient. I've raised it up just a little bit off the hearth so the heat can get underneath it. I'm wearing gloves and a face shield, and on the floor I have a quart of non-detergent motor oil. I do not have any quenching oil. I had quenching oil at the high school. I'm not sure exactly what it is. And make sure you got all your tools ready, whatever you're going to need, because once the temperature is reached, you don't have time to start looking for tools, materials, and supplies. I do not have a heat treating furnace as such, and the tempering will be done in my kitchen oven at 450 degrees. Now, once I light the torch, it's relatively loud, so I cannot speak any longer. It's that swirling noise of a press-to-light torch that causes that noise. It doesn't use oxygen, but it's just mixing air at this point to provide the oxygen. So I will play the heat on it and try to bring it up to heat rather slowly, and once it's red, let it maintain that red heat for a little bit while, which we call soaking. Here we go. See those tempering colors already, so it's at about 600 degrees. I like to watch those colors come in. It's about ready to go. I'm going to touch it with a magnet. Notice that it has lost its magnetism because it's at the critical temperature. No magnetism at all. Okay, I'm going to move the camera and quench it. Very smoky. Luckily, my wife went to Walmart. Here it is, fresh out of the oil. Notice that magnetism has returned, in case some of you do not understand that. And it's very hard. I don't know if you can hear that or not. I'm going to shine it up just a little bit with emery cloth on both sides and then proceed to temper it. And according to the directions, it said to do that immediately, if not sooner. It's polished up a bit on both surfaces, not on the other surfaces. And so hopefully I'll see the colors. Alright, to the kitchen we go. Notice that it is not sharpened yet. That'll be done later on. I didn't want too sharp a point on there in case the heat would melt that off when I got it red hot, but it doesn't appear that there's any damage. Okay, I'm in the kitchen. Forgive the spilled pizza. Notice that it's at 475 degrees. And I've got a plate of steel in there. It's already preheated. The oven is preheated. Okay, so much for that, and we'll leave it in there for about 15 minutes, and then I will just turn the oven off. Alright, there's a harsh sunbeam there, so you can't really see the color, so I'm going to let it cool just a few more minutes, and it's down to, according to this, about 350, so I'll leave the oven door open for a few minutes, then take it downstairs and we will examine it. For those few that might be interested, this is my heat source for my torch, and it's just an acetylene tank. Some of you might call this a plumber's torch. You'll often see these used by air conditioning men, silver soldering the Freon lines, but there are 4 different tips, and if I had it to do over again, I would use the next larger tip, which is this one. I was using this tip here, and they come right off. And by the way, this is about empty. I gotta get that refilled at the welding store. It's a handy torch. I paid 25 bucks for it used the way you see it here. And I'm trying to find the name on here. Just a series of warnings. I've shown this in several other videos, but if you Google tempering colors, and that obviously came from the UK because they misspelled it, and you're going to find several different tempering charts. This one's a little bit harder to read, but here is my scriber, and you can see that it's a relatively dark straw color. The tempering instructions here called for anywhere between 3 and 6, so I believe I was at 450. That's about the way the color looks, as well as the temperature of the oven that I set. So I'm approximately 62 Rockwell hardness, and I checked it again with the file, and it is very hard. That color, a deep straw. It's a pretty color. It's not showing up in the video, but that's a very pretty color. So the tempering is done. Now I need to sharpen it. This never was clean since I hardened it, so you can see that there's scale on it. So I will take this to the belt sander, sharpen it. You see it's relatively blunt right now. There's the color showing up nice. So that's all there is to hardening and tempering. Now when I sharpen this, I have to be very, very careful not to overheat the tip, because the very end, which is the only part that really matters, is the part that will heat up the fastest. If you've done any heating, you know that. The cutting edge, the fine edge, is what will almost instantly heat up, and then you've ruined it. Now you could go back, if you ruin something like this, you can go back and heat treat it again. It won't hurt a thing. Notice that there are no cracks. That, whatever that is something that it picked up on that steel plate that I threw in the oven to set it on. Okay, I'll be right back after sharpening this. Hope you enjoyed that little bit. I wasn't going to show that, but you know, there are some of you that haven't seen other videos where I might have shown this before. I've sharpened the tip, and it sure would be swell to have a surface grinder to do that job with, because you'd have coolant and you could control the angle. This was freehand. Now the last thing that I'm going to do, and by the way, it could be surface ground or sharpened on this side as well, but I'm going to run that just a little bit on my oil stone here, and then it's ready to use. And finally, here's the finished poor man's height gauge with the scriber. I may have mentioned it before, but for those of you in metric countries, these rulers usually have metric on one side and imperial on the other side. Now I get many scathing comments saying, why don't you use the metric system? You poor boys over there don't understand it. Yes, I do. We learn the metric system in physics and chemistry because that's all you use in science labs. So there it is, and let me talk a little bit about how I will use this. Now let me show you how I am calibrating this. I'm at the 1 inch mark, and I have set that as close as I can with my eyes. Actually, I got optivisors on, to the 1 inch mark. Why aren't you using the 0 mark? Because remember, I had to grind the hook off, and I'm not sure where the 0 mark is on these little giveaway rulers. So I am using a 1 inch gauge block and setting it on the 1 inch gauge block now. With the 1 inch setting here, I am able to move the post up and down until I am at 1 inch. And then I will tighten. Now I'm set for 1/2 inch, 500 thousandths. Now how accurate are those? Well, I told you that this is a semi-accurate, semi-precision instrument. For much of your work, depending on what you're doing, this will be accurate enough. For you see, it's certainly just as accurate as you can work with a combination square or any of your other layout instruments. For many years, if I'm in a big hurry, I would use, well, these are tool bits here, 1/8 inch, 3/16, 1/4 inch, 5/16, and 3/8. Now, they may be a few thousandths off, but often, if I'm in a hurry and I wanted to measure, let's say 1/8 of an inch, I would just set the scriber right there at 1/8 of an inch, or at a 1/4 of an inch, or whatever is needed. So this is the system that you can use with the poor man's tool. Let's take it a step further. Everybody's got sets of drill bits in the fractional, number, probably letter, and you can use metric if you have those. But if you take any given drill bit and it is not one that is mutilated on the shank or it is not bent, for instance, here's a brand new 29/64, would be perfect, a perfect gauge to set, and you're ready to scribe if you wanted something 27/64. Virtually everyone has transfer punches. They also are available in fractional, number, letter, and metric. And if you select the size that you need and it is not mushroomed, as this one may be, or it is not bent, and you can check for bent ones simply by rolling them like this, and that's a 1/2 inch one, and we could set the gauge for 1/2 inch. Now let's go even one step farther. I have several sets of gauge blocks, even though I don't talk about them much, and these are Starrett, which are the Weber gauge. I believe they bought Weber out, but here you have incredibly accurate gauges in virtually every size. Now you can buy a relatively inexpensive set of gauge blocks that are shop grade, and they are still more accurate than anything that you would ever need. And you see me use this 1 inch one all the time. That kind of, I call these Joe blocks sometimes, and some of them said Ford on it because Ford bought out Johannesson. There's another Weber, but that was in an auction box that somebody probably used to calibrate a micrometer. So whenever I need a 1 incher, that's the one I grab. These, and I'm not going to talk about how to care for these right now, but look at all the sizes here: 900, 850, and if you ring them together you got really an infinite number, all the way up to 4-inch. That's a 4-incher. So consider that as a method. However, if you are well enough off to have a set of these, which are expensive even used, you certainly have one of these, so the point is moot. Get yourself a little black granite surface plate. They don't cost very much, but keep it clean when you use it for this purpose. So it must be wiped. You know, you can even scrub this with water because it's not going to rust, and keep the bottom of your surface gauge clean it all the time. And here's what is that? A 500 thousandths, a 625, and a 3/4. And I'm surprised in the Weber that I'm running into several Brown & Sharpe gauge blocks. So anyway, it can be very quickly set. But make sure that you take the little tilt or rock out of the gauge. This has been a 4-part video running way longer, and I'm sorry. You know, I keep finding myself apologizing. Now, if you've ever watched the great movie called The Last Picture Show, Cloris Leachman is constantly apologizing and has nothing to apologize for, and then breaks out crying because of that. It's just a wonderful scene, so watch that, The Last Picture Show. Well, there it is, ladies and gentlemen, a dissertation on height gauges, the different kinds that I have, the model, the mock-up that I made, and there will be no drawings on this. But it may be helpful for you to make something in wood first, and then last but not least, the final product here, the poor man's height gauge. Remember that I also made a shorter post for that if I want to do strictly short work, and I'm annoyed by the top part here. And you know, it doesn't take much to annoy me. I think you might have noticed that. And before I conclude the video here, be sure and go back and watch the video where I make this micrometer carriage stop. There's a couple of them here for the Atlas Craftsman 12-inch lathe, and of course it was based or modeled after the original one, but there might be some of you that need to make one of those. So thank you ever so much for supporting my channel and watching this video, and the wonderful comments that you give. So this is tubalcain saying so long for now, and I will see you in my next video.